Hi there, my name's Liv and I make things. After taking a couple days off to recharge my creative batteries, I wanted my first video back to be a challenging one. After searching the internet, I came across this photo and thought it would be a really good challenge for me because it has so many small moving parts. Also, Beedle is just very cute. He definitely isn't hiding anything. No, not at all. So I drew up a couple blueprints. These aren't really useful other than to just have me really look at the design of the character and see all the moving parts close up. It's very helpful with the planning process. First thing I started off with was the backpack. I made this tinfoil ball that I covered in clay, like I almost always do. A couple pour transitions later, and we have the base to work on. The backpack turns out beetle shaped. It took me so long to realize that it is a beetle. I think I played Breath of the Wild for a good 200 hours, but I never actually noticed. Since it is a backpack with lots of parts that are all stitched together, I drew on some seam lines as well as some stitch lines. For the back, there are 3 pockets, which I just laid down some clay snakes that I flattened down into the trim of the pockets. Then I added on the extra tail that goes onto the top pocket. This tail also got the same seam lines along the sides. And then I started shaping out more of the body of the bag. It is a beetle, so it has these kind of beetle slats, which I just depressed into the clay with one of my sculpting tools. And then I also added some more seam lines along the edge. Because it worked so well with Zant, I decided to texturize the bag again. I basically just rolled the grip part of one of my metal tools along the entire surface. The front of the bag has this draped sort of banner, so I rolled out some thin clay and then laid it along the front and just pressed it down onto the rest of the bag. For this project, there was a lot of this sort of folded clay, which was very fun to drape around. Next, I added on the 3 little decorative banner triangle things that go behind Beedle. For his actual body, I made a tinfoil base and then covered it with clay. I made this sort of bust shape so that I could sculpt out the hair and the face. I made eye sockets in the face so that I could add little balls of clay to act as the eyeballs. Next, I added on his eyebrows of worry and pressed in the corners of his mouth. I added some lines to the hair just to create some hair texture. Now you get this wonderful shot of his disgusting creepy chicken legs. I didn't really show doing a lot of it because it was so messy. You can see me struggling to figure out how crossed legs actually look. I had to get my partner to sit on the ground and cross his legs so I could kind of mimic what I was seeing. It still ended up looking kind of bizarre, but I knew it was going to end up being covered by Beedle's little serving plate thing, so I wasn't too worried about it. I just wanted to make them look like legs and not like blobs. Beedle also has this waist scarf, I guess you could say, that I added on with some loose clay. And then on top of that, I added Beedle's belt. Next thing to add was a shirt. I did the same thing with some thin pieces of clay that I pushed down and then just cut out to the right shape. At this point I was really happy with how he was looking, and I was absolutely dreading adding his arms because I figured it was going to be the same problem that I had with the legs. They ended up looking not that bad. I didn't really film it because it was so painful to do. His arms are very long, so if he were to stand, he would probably look more like an ape than a person, but it's still not that bad. Here you can see me struggling with how to place his hands. I had the same problem as I did with crossing his legs. I was having difficulty visualizing what it should actually look like. Eventually I got the shape that I wanted. Next thing to add was his bandana, which was the same thing that I did before. It was just a flat piece of clay that I kind of folded into shape and added on. In this case, it wasn't the right triangular shape that I was looking for, so I cut down the sides a little bit. And I also added the tie onto the back. The sides of the bag have these 3 metal hangers. So basically what I did was take some extra wire that I kind of twisted to make it a little bit wider, put it against the sides, and then lay down a strip of clay over top so that whenever I bake it, I can take the metal wire out and there'll be holes for the metal clasp to go through. For the bedroll on the back, I just laid out a flat piece of clay and just rolled it into a bedroll. I added some indentations where I'm going to be adding string later on. I also added the buckles to the back pockets of the backpack. Next thing I made was a little serving plate that's going to be on Beedle's lap. Has some nice wood grain on it and some holes that I'm going to have some string run through later. I also made the tiny coin plate that is going to sit on top of the wooden board. Some other bibs and bobs I made was the stick that Beedle's sign hangs from that comes out of the back of his bag, as well as this little wooden stick that the sign is actually going to be hanging off of, and a little light bulb. I also made the parasol canopy thing that covers Beedle and protects him from the rain. For the water bottle on the back, it's a snail shell, so I rolled a snake of clay into this snail shell shape, and then I added on some more clay just to get the shape that I was looking for. For this bag, I made the holster initially out of clay entirely, including the handle strap. As you're gonna see later on in the video, that handle strap disappears because it broke off after I baked it, as most things do whenever I work with polymer clay because the world hates me. So yeah, this doesn't last very long. I end up replacing it with actual fabric that is much more easy to manage and move around. For the fruit basket on the side, I took a cylinder of tinfoil that I covered in clay, and then around the rim it got this sort of rope design. I added some, I think they're tomatoes, to the inside, which I covered with a little square of clay that's going to be the yellow cloth that sort of covers them. And then along the sides, I used one of my scoring tools to press in the woven sort of reed pattern that the side of the basket has. The next thing to do was to make the little herb bundles that hang off the sides of the bags and the basket. For this, I made 2 different designs. There are 2 that have hot peppers and 2 that don't. All of the herb bundles were made the same. I basically took a long snake of clay and then made multiple smaller snakes of clay that I pressed down into leaf shapes and then sort of swiped or pressed onto the main stem of the bushel. I kept doing this, starting from the bottom, working my way up. I made some of them curl, depending what I felt like was a good look. And then at the top, I added a couple little stick pieces. For the bags, I basically just took tinfoil balls, which I covered in clay, along with little square cloth bits at the bottom. And then for the stems of the bag, I just took a flat piece of clay, kind of folded it into the shape I like, and then attached it to the top. For all of these, I don't need to worry about sculpting out rope because I'm going to be using actual rope, and I'll just tie it on after I've painted them all. I also added some seam lines on the squares on the bottom. Two of the bags are painted in this soft yellow color that looks way brighter on camera than it is in real life. And then one of the bags got a more sandy white. All three bags had the same bottom color. The little square was painted in this light brown, and then I drew on little thread lines for the little stitching underneath. Beautiful. For the herb bundles, they also all got painted the same green color. I painted the stems a kind of brown at the top, and the peppers got a nice little pepper red. I also added some shadows and highlights to the leaves. Next thing I painted was the wooden board, as well as the coin plate and the wooden stick that holds up Beedle's sign. I painted the tomatoes inside the basket red, added on some black dots as well as some shadows, and I painted the whole basket this very warm orangey brown color. Later on, I painted over the basket with this darker brown wash to fill in the cracks and crevices with some nice shadow, and you can see the top fabric was painted a light orange with some yellow details. For the water bottle, it's painted this orangey, sandy, kind of peachy color. After everything is dried, I spray it down with some sealer and then I can start tying everything off. Basically just took some of this brown embroidery thread, I wrapped it 3 times around each bundle and then tied it off. I did the same for the purple bedroll, and I covered each of the knots in some white glue just so that they wouldn't come apart. I also super glued the string onto the light bulb, which I painted with some glow-in-the-dark paint because of course I did. Next thing to do was the posters. These were very, very, very fun to do. I painted these with some fabric paint. Each one has a unique design, and I just made sure to look really close at that concept art that I showed earlier on so that I would get them really accurate. They were very tiny, they were very fun and very cute. I especially liked this red one. I thought the lines were just so crisp. This is what they look like after they were done. The green pad that goes on the wooden board on Beedle's lap, nice and green with some lines and dots. This sign is upside down. Don't judge me. It took me so long to realize it was upside down. I even glued it on upside down, but I glued it on with white glue, so thankfully I was able to take it off. I fix it by the end. It gets fixed eventually. It just takes me a long time to notice. This was probably my favorite sign with Beedle's tiny face, and I painted it on both sides. Now we can get on to gluing. I glued the green little tarp onto Beedle's wooden board. And I flipped it over to maintain the pressure and made sure that it would glue down. For his banner, I glued the end and then just sort of wrapped it around that little wooden dowel I made and pressed it down. Here you can see me gluing the sign on the wrong way. Again, I ended up fixing it, but I still did it wrong. I don't know how it took me so long to figure out it was wrong. For Beedle's face, he's pretty tan, so he gets a nice tan skin tone. As you can see, the backpack straps are a little choppy looking. Whenever I initially sculpted him, he was attached to the bag, but whenever I took it out of the oven, I foolishly touched it and it fell apart, because of course it did. This ended up working out to my benefit though, because I was able to paint his back and the entire bag as 2 separate pieces, and then I just glued them together. His waist scarf and his handkerchief around his neck are this cherry red color. I painted his head this nice orangey auburn brown. His pants got a nice coating of blue, and his belt and his shoes are the same yellow tone as well. I painted on the pupils of his eyes and the 4 freckles on each of his cheeks. I started painting the yellow part of the backpack straps. I painted the whole backpack off of camera. It's basically the same soft color that I put on the straps with some darker brown shadows. The belly sort of part of the backpack is this light blue, and then I painted the tarp a more royal blue that have these little light blue V and polka dot design. All that's left to do is paint the 3 little triangle banners along the front. Then I added the metal clasps to the 2 bottom holes on the side of the bag that I'm going to hang all of the bags, herbs, the basket from on either side. I attach the water bottle, and we can get on to the final reveal. Thank you so much for watching this video. This was so much fun to make. As you can see, I fixed the poster that was upside down. Good job, me. This dude is so detailed. He was so much fun. Everything is nice and like loose and organically hanging, which I very much enjoy. The light bulb glows in the dark, which is super cool. He's very cute, and I'm very happy with how he turned out. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of my creations, then maybe you should subscribe. And also, if you liked it, like the video. I would appreciate it. I don't know what else to say. Thank you. Bye.